All right. So before we proceed to the reading of our character, um, I would like to take some time to explain how constraints work. Constraints are found here in the constraint menu over in the animation pull down selection here. The submenu animation here is constraint. And as you can see, we have many types of constraints. A constraint is basically a dependency, a sort of dependency that's created between two objects. And it's very, very useful when we are rigging our characters, since most of the controllers that we are going to use to manipulate our character are based in constraints. So this lesson, I will just go very briefly over some of the constraints we're going to use in our rigging process. So I don't have to explain them during the building of our Lego character, but rather just say, okay, we're going to apply this type of constraint, and that's it. It's just to make the tutorial a bit easier to understand, to follow, and also faster and not so exhausting. So for starters, I will create a couple objects in here, a sphere and a cube. I'm going to click here on my view so I can have the outliner open. And here you can see I have the two objects I just created, the sphere and a cube, which I'm going to pull up just a tiny bit over the sphere so we can see what we're doing over here. That's it. All right. So let's bring the, let's say I'm going to bring this 1.5 units above, and this one will be like that. Okay. So now, whenever I want to establish a constraint between two objects, first I have to select the parent object, or the object that's going to define or dictate what's going to happen to the constrained object, in this case the cube. So first I'm going to select here the sphere, which will be my parent, and then, or the driving object. And then with shift, I'm going to click on the cube, which is my driven object. Okay. And then let's explore the first constraint, point. I'm going to the options here, edit, reset the settings. Don't forget to reset the settings. And usually the way constraint work is the position of the pivot of each of the objects. So as you can see here, I'm just going to click apply. And the first thing that you can see is that my cube goes inside back inside the sphere. That's because the cube and the sphere both have the pivot at the center of them. So if I click here, if I go here and click 4, there you can see that the cube is inside the sphere. And if I move the sphere, the cube is following. Okay. I'm going to control set this, and instead, since I want to keep the position of the cube relative to the sphere here, I'm going to set this option maintain offset to on. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click apply again. And now the cube stays at the position where I made the constraint. So if I select the sphere here, whenever I move the sphere, the cube is following. However, if I rotate the cube, notice how the box is not doing anything. It stays exactly at the same position. So the point constraint, it's a constraint that will help me keep an object attached to another one, or following the translation of another object, but the translation only, not the rotation or the scale. Even if I scale this object, as you can see, nothing's happened here. I'm going back here, control set, just to go back where I started. And I'm going to reset the settings again and close this. I'm going to, you can go inside the outliner and select the constraint here, which is represented by a exclamation mark in red. I select the constraint and I can just delete it, and there my two objects are fresh, like when I started the scene. Okay, I'm going to select again the driver and the driven objects. and then I'm going to constrain, and let's explore the second one, aim. I'm going to open here the option box, and let's say that my aim vector, I'm going to reset the settings actually, and by default the aim vector is always X. I'm gonna hit apply and see what happens. As you can see here, the X-axis of my object is now looking at my my driver object, or aiming at, right? So whenever I move the sphere, the X-axis of the cube is always pointing to it. That's an aim constraint. All right. Now I'm going back here to the default position, and if instead of the aiming vector being X, let's say I would have typed Y, hit apply. Oops. I need to select first the driver object and then the driven object, and then hit apply here. Notice how now my Y-axis is the one pointing or aiming at the driver. All right. So here it's barely noticeable because it's a cube, but whenever you have an object and you want to aim, let's say you have a camera that you want to be aiming at a target point all the time, you can use this type of constraint. All right. I'm going to reset the settings. I'm going to close it. I'm going to delete the constraint again and return the rotation here to 0. So now my Y-axis is pointing up, just like in here. All right, select again my driver object and then my driven object, and let's explore the next constraint, orient. I'm going to reset the settings and hit apply. As you can see here, if I move the object, nothing's happening. However, if I rotate it, it's keeping the driven object is keeping the same orientation. How do I know that? I can select this object, and if you go here to the display, no, sorry, it's yeah, this display menu, transform display, local rotation axis, and let's say we press 4, you can see there are the rotation axis of this object. So if I select this, notice how the Y-axis is pointing, is having the same orientation in the cube as in the sphere. Same for the rest of them, the X-axis and the Z-axis. If I decide to rotate this thing to the other side and then to this side, notice how the axes are keeping the same orientation. That's an orient constraint. Okay. Again, I can move this, but nothing's happening. I can also scale it, and nothing's going to happen because it's just the only value that's getting constrained to the driver object are the translations. Okay, let's go back to this. Reset settings, close the tool, delete the constraint, and again, let's select our parent and then or our driver and then our driven object, and explore the scale constraint. I'm going to hit apply here, and notice, as you can imagine here, I can move the object, nothing happens. I can rotate the object, nothing happens. However, at the moment I'm starting scaling up, the scale on the other object gets affected. Okay, so that's the scale constraint. Oops. I'm going to delete it here, and then I'll just reset the settings here. Yeah, I'm going to close this. Okay, I select again my driver, and then my driven object, and then go here to constraint, and let's see the last constraint we will review for our creation of our character. Notice how here by default, when I reset the settings, the maintain offset option is on. This is because usually when I parent constrain two objects, I want one of the objects, the son objects, to do exactly the same things that the parent object is doing. So if I hit apply here, and now I select this and move it, it's moving along, the cube is moving along with the sphere. Also, if I rotate it, it's not only following the orientation, but also it's staying at the same point where I made the constraint. And if I scale it, notice how there's some displacement in here, because the offset is being kept between the pivots of the two objects. So if I would like this to remain close to it, I would have to scale both objects at the same time. All right. So that's basically it. I'm going to jump into another tutorial as another appendix, so we can continue explaining some of the functionality that we're going to have on our objects before we proceed to continue with our rig. Thank you.